Harry Johnson, the rival to Jerry Thomas. Now, if you haven't watched, or you are starting to watch this now, if you go to our first episode on some great bartenders, I talked about Jerry Thomas. Well, Harry Johnson was his rival. Harry Johnson was born in Prussia, and he was actually also a sailor, and he ended up in San Francisco because he actually broke his arm and his hip, and he ended up having to be left there to recuperate. So he actually ended up staying, and this was in 1861, and he ended up working as actually a kitchen boy. Then he became a bartender, and then he became the manager as well. And it's also during this period he met his great rival, Jerry Thomas, and these guys really fucking hate each other. If you thought bartenders weren't prissy fucks now, nothing's changed, right? And in fact, their rivalry was really fucking big. Then about 8 years later, he ended up going to Chicago, and supposedly, according to him, all right, got to bear in mind when it comes to Mr. Harry Johnson. Harry Johnson does sort of exaggerate or says a few things, and there's not really evidence to prove it. And he supposedly says, 8 years later in 1869, that there was a massive competition in New Orleans against some of the greatest bartenders of the time, and that he won. However, there is no record of this. He also claims that he wrote his first book in 1860. There's no record of that either. But he did write an amazing book, and it is The Bartender's Guide and How to Basically Set Up a Bar. And we'll go into that detail later, but we'll get a bit more about his life at the moment. And then unfortunately in Chicago, in 1871, there was the Great Fire, and he lost his bar, right? Then about 8 years later, he moved to New York City and set up his first bar there, and that was a place called Little Jumbo. Now, the thing as well is, though, that Jerry Thomas used to own Little Jumbo, and when Jerry Thomas found out that Harry Johnson was there, he was like, no, I've got nothing to do with this. This is nothing, I've never owned it, and oh my goodness, oh my God, honestly. Constantly the fighting between the two of them. I mean, the thing is, it was just very differing styles of bartending. Jerry Thomas was very much flair, real flair and pizzazz, and a lot of, I don't know, just fire and tricks and showmanship. Whereas Harry Johnson, to me, always feels like the guy that, so anally retentive that if he ate charcoal, he would shit diamonds. All right, and then by 1880, Harry Johnson and Jerry Thomas, their rivalry absolutely peaked, and I mean the hatred for each other was just on a whole nother fucking level, to the point where Harry Johnson was at his bar and he was making a drink called the Jerry Thomas, and the Tom and Jerry. And the Tom and Jerry is supposedly, according to Jerry Thomas, should only be made when it gets the first snowfall or first snowflake. Now, Jerry Thomas walked into the bar when Harry Johnson was making a big batch of this in a big punch bowl, and threw an epic hissy fit, got the punch bowl and smashed it on the floor in the bar, Little Jumbo, in front of Harry Johnson, and said, "You should not be doing this. It's not cold enough." And it's like, what the hell? Seriously. So that was at its peak. And then around 1890, Harry decided to just start retiring and chilling out a little bit more. And he then set up his own consultancy agency. And you also should know this is rather important, because in 1890, Harry Johnson's bar consultancy, or bar and restaurant consultancy company, was the first ever bar and consultancy company. Number one, the beginning, all right? Now we're going to do some drinks, and we're going to talk about a little bit of the books that he made, and a bit of a hard time for Harry Johnson as well. Okay, so one of the drinks we're going to make right now is something called a Bijou, or otherwise known as a jewel. It is a very easy drink, 1 ounce of gin. Now, the reason why it's called a jewel, and it's a good way to remember it, is gin, diamond, right? And then Rosso Vermouth, the ruby, 1 ounce. the Emerald Green Chartreuse, 1 ounce. A dash of orange bitters, which is optional. And then you stir the drink. Harry Johnson published a book called The Improved Bartender's Manual. And what was so amazing about this book, and he did this, this was in 1882. He did say he did one earlier, which I touched on a bit earlier, but the 1882 one was the first one. After that, there was many revised editions. But what was so unique about this book and separated it from Jerry Thomas, his rivals, was he showed about how to really do the nuts and bolts of a bar or a restaurant, how to set up your well, how to store everything, how to do your costings, employment costs, liquor costs, setup, cleaning, how to do training, development, how to look after your employees, how to invest and to pre-plan and predict and forecasting business and budgets. No one else did this in a book, right? Harry Johnson did. He was the first one. And yes, he may be anally retentive, but because of that, bars, I felt, got better and better and better, and it's because of his book, and he's famous for it. However, there was a bit of a dark time for him. Because he was not a pure American born, and he was German or Prussian born, around 1913, things got a little hard for him. And America was going through its usual racism or anti-immigration period, as usual. They always go through it. Nothing changed much. And the president at the time, Mr. Woodrow Wilson, he coined a phrase, and it's called hyphenated Americans. And he coined it in 1889 and became even more popular, especially when the beginning of the outbreak of World War I, where people who weren't truly American and they were actually proving or have allegiances to other countries, especially those that were German. And in fact, newspapers used to publish the names and addresses of Germans in places around the country, and it was not good. A little bit like a certain president that occupied before Biden came along, right? Not much different, actually. History tends to repeat itself. Well, unfortunately that happened. Harry Johnson found it very, very hard. And so he ended up leaving again. He also had a bit of a messy, vicious divorce as well, and things just didn't really work out for him in the end. But because of him, we have some amazing drinks. We have a great cocktail and bar book or management book. And then what happened in the end was, so strain, 1 ounce of gin, 1 ounce of Rosso Vermouth, 1 ounce of Green Chartreuse, dash of orange bitters. It's the emeralds. So always think diamonds, rubies, and emeralds, okay? And do orange oil over the top. There you go. And then he went back to Prussia, got sick. He was in the middle of trying to sort out his divorce and property and taxes. He got a lot of hate mail as well because he was German descent. And on the 5th of January 1930, Harry Johnson passed away. But without him, wouldn't have had one of the most amazing cocktail books ever written. So thank you, Mr. Harry Johnson. And that is a Bijou. Thank you. So now we're going to make one of Harry Johnson's drinks. Now, he was also actually famous, or sometimes people accredit him with actually making something called a martini, or the martini a la Bradford, which not necessarily is going to be him. That's a little unfair. However, it got so popular, his drink, the martini a la Bradford, which is basically a martini, it's 50-50, which is so half dry vermouth, half gin. It got so famous that people, bartenders just used to call it the Bradford. But what we're going to do is something called the Black Thorne. Now, the Black Thorne is I do 1.5 ounces of Irish whiskey. All right. Then we do 1.5 dry vermouth. Now you can split this as well. Some people do. They do equal parts, half of Rosso Vermouth, half of dry. But I'm going to keep traditionally to his, as much as I can to his menu. and then 1.5 ounces of dry vermouth, 3 dashes of absinthe, and then I'm going to add, it goes for Bokers bitters, but I'm going to use Bogarts bitters because I actually don't have any Bokers. So I'm going to use Bogarts. 1, 2, 3. Right? There it is. Then we stir it all up. And that's it. Get a nice glass. Strain. He doesn't actually say what kind of garnish, but what I would probably do with this one would be lemon, because there's dry vermouth in it. It's very dark, that's because of the Bogarts bitters that I've used, because they're more of a cola bean based, all right? But if you don't have that, Angostura would be fine, okay? There it is, Blackthorn. Ooh. Ooh. Thank you. Now, fuck off. Get home safe. Oh, please don't forget. Make sure you like us, click us. Please, I'd like to keep this going. Thank you.